هدانا إلى الإسلام والإيمان وفتح لنا أبواب الجنان خاصة في شهر رمضان. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه أجمعين. أما بعد، قال تعالى في كتاب العزيز: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. أيها الناس، اتقوا الله فإن التقوى رأس كل شيء. اتقوا الله وأطيعوه وراقبوه. Possibly from now onwards, and perhaps even last week and the week before, the khutbahs are going to be centered around, Friday sermons are going to be probably centered around Ramadan, for obvious reasons. It's round the corner, about 3 weeks away. We're in the first week of Sha'ban, or the first 1.5 weeks of Sha'ban, the month prior to Ramadan. It's a month where the Awliya of Allah, the true saints and devotees of Allah, men and women, eagerly anticipate what is to come. It is the month that some of us lazy ones are thinking, though we may not say it with our mouths, sometimes we express it with our limbs and attitudes that, oh boy, not again. And then there are the rest of us somewhere in between, anticipation and concern. Every year we hear what we should be doing in Ramadan, and every year Ramadan becomes that moment in time, that occasion in which thousands, tens of thousands of people, perhaps Muslims around the world, make a U-turn from their prior life, heading towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the home of the hereafter. And I don't mean a U-turn just in Ramadan, because then that number is more than tens and hundreds of thousands. That scores in the millions. But actually, the question that is often asked immediately after Ramadan, it might occur to the human heart: how do I know that my deeds and my striving in Ramadan has been accepted? A similar question can be asked after pilgrimage or Hajj, or even Umrah, the lesser Hajj. How do I know that my pilgrimage, my Hajj, has been accepted? Similar answers the scholars have told us from early on. See how your life is after Ramadan, or after Hajj as the case may be. And if there is a greater connection, a greater devotion, a greater concern, a greater focus, a greater mindfulness on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and obedience to Him and loving submission to Him, then inshallah ta'ala that's an ishara, that's an ayah, that's a sign that Allah accepted your pilgrimage or accepted your fasting and you're on the path. But if it be that the pilgrimage went off seemingly okay, oh, Ramadan went off pretty well, as far as I'm concerned, but as soon as it finished, I went back to my old ways and habits. I kind of disconnected. That's a problem. And it's less a problem in what we do or don't do, it's more a problem in attitude. What we do is probably wrong, but the attitude stinks, right? And so it's the attitude, the inner state of the soul that I need to attend to first. The talk isn't going to be about the details of what we will do in Ramadan, simply because we're about 3 weeks away. I want to mention one or two things, and the theme of Ramadan will most certainly be picked up by other khatibs and other sermonizers thereafter. Two things. So we're in, three things really. We're in the month of Sha'ban, and it's a blessed month. The Prophet ﷺ used to actually increase in fasting in this month, and those who are used to fasting throughout the year are encouraged to increase in Ramadan, increase in the month of Sha'ban in fasting, as long as it doesn't weaken them or become an obstacle in the way of their fasting in the month of Ramadan. Those of us who may not be used to fasting throughout the year, optional fasting throughout the year, we need to just focus on the coming month of Ramadan to get that right as a priority. But I'm going to mention an issue of Sha'ban, and I'm going to mention the golden rule of differing. The issue of Sha'ban is this. The Prophet ﷺ said, and there are a number of hadiths, there are about 30 or 40 hadiths, but of those 30 or 40, 4 or 5 of them in the Sunan of Tirmidhi, in the Sunan of Ibn Majah, and other well-known hadith collections, 4 or 5 of them have been considered by the vast majority of the hadith scholars, hadith specialists, to be authentic. Meaning these are the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A minority of hadith scholars say, well, each of these hadiths are slightly weak, so we can't really convincingly say that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said these words. So I'm going to recite the words and consider them authentic according to the majority opinion of hadith scholars for the last 11, 12, 1300 years. And it's a hadith of Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu, where he says, and in Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, يَطْلَعُ اللَّهُ إِلَى خَلْقِهِ فِي لَيْلَةِ النِّصْفِ مِنْ شَعْبَانِ فَيَغْفِرُ لِجَمِيعِ خَلْقِهِ إِلَّا مُشْرِكٍ وَمُشَاهٍ. Allah looks at the entire creation on the 15th night of Sha'ban, and He forgives everyone except an unbeliever and except a Muslim who has an unjustified argument or enmity, bad blood between him and his Muslim brother or sister, as the case may be. Allah looks at the entire creation on the 15th night of Sha'ban, Laylatul Nisfi min Sha'ban, and forgives everyone except the mushrik, here it means the disbeliever, and the mushahin, the one who has an unjustified quarrel, dispute, not a minor thing. You ate my rich tea biscuits and I'm a bit annoyed. Something serious. Okay. Now this Laylatul Nisf min Sha'ban, 15th night of Sha'ban, this and other hadiths which inshallah are authentic tell us that Allah is more forgiving. So by the second generation of Muslims, the students of the Sahaba, we found groups of them, either at home or in the mosque at night time, making dua, doing extra prayer, doing extra acts of worship. Why? Because Allah is more forgiving on this night than other nights. And they wanted to meet Allah's forgiveness with something that might draw them closer to it. As Imam Ibn Taymiyyah says, this is the amal, the practice of many of the Salaf, of many of the early Muslim Imams and scholars. And as he says quite rightly, so it cannot be objected to. So it cannot be objected to. 2 or 3 points. Firstly, we're talking about doing optional acts of worship on that night. So if you're following the calendar of local moon sighting, as I am, then the 15th night will be Tuesday night. And the 15th day will be Wednesday. The 15th night will be this Tuesday night. Point 1. It's optional acts. As regards to what had been invented or innovated about 600 or 550 years after the time of the Prophet, and that on the 15th night of Sha'ban there is a specific prayer prayed in twos and twos and twos, and in each of these rak'ahs you recite Qul Huwallahu Ahad until you get to 100 Qul Huwallahu Ahads. That is an innovated prayer, and most scholars have spoken harshly, quite rightly, against this innovated prayer. But as regards to just optional prayers, optional du'as, optional good deeds in that night, then this has been and continues to be the majoritarian practice based upon believing these hadiths are authentic. That's my first point. My second point is, I did mention that a minority of great hadith scholars considered all of these hadiths not to quite reach the level of being sahih, of being authentic. Either being, as they say, mildly weak, da'if, very weak, da'if jiddan, or worse. And therefore, those scholars, and they are proper scholars of the past, for them, the 15th night of Sha'ban is like any other night. It's just a normal night. It's not a night to single out with anything special. If you're up, you're up. If you sleep, you sleep. It's not a problem. And these scholars of the past didn't make it an issue between themselves. Why? Because it was a matter of what they call ijtihad, scholarly difference of opinion. According to my sound, deep, scholarly, I'm not talking about your average Mawlan in the mosque or your sensationalist celebrity YouTube video guy. We're talking about scholars. And we're not talking about someone who just graduated from a Darul Uloom, in his first or second year. We're talking about real scholars, not kind of junior scholars. We're talking about senior, major scholars of Islam. Okay? Those scholars understood that this is a matter of judging whether those hadiths are authentic or not, and that is an issue in which you can see it in two different ways. And so those who saw it one way, that it is authentic, we can reliably say the Prophet said it, and if he said it, then he's saying this night Allah is more forgiving in this night. If Allah is more forgiving on this night, it's an indication that Allah doesn't want us just to sleep on that night. He wants us to do something extra. That became the majoritarian opinion very early on in Islam. And the other opinion I just mentioned. So that brings us to the second point, which is when there is a legitimate difference of opinion, between the rightly guided scholars of Islam, the past scholars of Islam, then either we are another scholar at that level that can look into the reasons behind why they've chosen opinion A or opinion B and go with A or B, or we're not, and we just trust our scholars. The fatwa that I read, the sheikh that I asked, God forbid the internet site that I went onto, use that as a last point. The madhab that I follow, we do X, Y, Z. Khalas. And you just get on with life. And what we don't do is we don't use it to split the Muslim community. It is haram. It is haram. It is absolutely haram. Worse than drinking wine. Worse than fornicating with one's own mother. Worse than stealing. Worse than whatever of the kaba'ir, to split the ummah over that which Allah has not made an issue of division. Whoever, and unfortunately, you know that I'm talking not in a vacuum, goes around the ummah saying, oh, whoever, the 15th night of Shaban, that's all dodgy, deviant, whoever does it, ba 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 ba. These are misguided, dividing, sectarian cretins, idiots. But if someone says, bro, I just follow the opinion that says all the hadiths are weak. Not that I looked into it or could even look into it. I just trust the sheikh, so khalas, gonna get a good night's kip. Bismillah. Upon obedience to Allah, upon unity of the ummah. Or the other way around, which doesn't often happen, which is the majoritarian view, which is recommended. Then I find someone following the other opinion, think, what type of Muslim is that, sleeping on the 15th night of Shaban, got no fear of God, and then somehow feel more righteous than the other person, or he's less of a Muslim, or there's something wrong with his Islam. That is haram. That is a point of deviation. Why? Because this is legitimate difference of opinion. So the golden rule is that which the scholars of the past agreed upon, period. It's a done and dusted, agreed upon issue. Over 1,000 years ago, we find in the texts, there is an agreement that in jihad, it's not permissible to kill women and children. Okay? Now, it doesn't matter if some person in this present day pulls a verse from the Quran, well, in the Quran it says, inflict upon them the same punishment that they inflicted upon you. Well, they kill our women and children in some Muslim land. Therefore, no, we can't do that, because we can't put an interpretation on a verse that goes against an agreed upon scholarly understanding or consensus. That's not how the verse is to be read. It needs to be read in context of the other hadiths, the other evidences in which there is a scholarly agreement. Women and children are non-combatants in war, for example. When there is a scholarly agreement on anything, we're all bound to follow that scholarly agreement. When there is a legitimate difference of opinion, 15th of Sha'ban, then there's some flexibility in following that view or that view. Same thing with moon sighting. It'd be nice if as a country we all got it together, but moon sighting. From the time of the Sahaba, after the Prophet passed away, when the Prophet was around, when he starts celebrating Ramadan, that's it, end of. But the Prophet ﷺ, all he said was, fast when you see it, meaning the new moon, the crescent moon, and stop fasting when you see it, meaning it's the next month, the day of Eid. Fast when you see it. So when he ﷺ passed away, a group of the Sahaba said, who's you? They understood it to be you, as in you, the people of Medina, and the local surrounding areas, the villages and what might be near our city. But as regards to Makkah, 250 odd miles away, they've got their own sighting. And that became the opinion of some of the Sahaba. We follow local sighting, and everyone has their local sighting. And two of the four well-known Sunni madhabs followed this opinion. The other Sahaba said, we think the word you just means everybody. You as in all you Muslims. Such that when one Muslim or two Muslims spot the moon and they inform other people hundreds of miles away, those people are also obliged to start fasting as soon as they hear. It's not their local sighting, there's only one sighting. And that difference of opinion continues to be here until today. Now, of course, for so many practical reasons, each Muslim country ended up having their own moon sighting committees for the whole country. But point being is, there is a difference of opinion. So it's not an issue. I mean, it might frustrate us. Redbridge, IG4, Wanstead, we have 12 different sightings or whatever, okay, in different days. It's frustrating, but I'm talking it can't split hearts. This is important. Follow the classical scholars in that which in classical issues that they agreed upon. Follow the contemporary scholars in that which they have agreed upon in terms of new issues. And third point, do not be bigoted, sectarian, intolerant in matters of legitimate scholarly differences, such as the 15th of Sha'ban, such as moon sighting. If we don't have this in our individual personal lives, it doesn't matter how good my character is and how friendly I am, I will always be a source of division for the ummah. Because I'll take an issue and think, oh wow, you know what, this is the truth, barring none. And I'll go around saying, oh, you're a bit dodgy, you've got a wobbly aqidah, you're this, you're that, he's this, he's that, and he's the other. And I would have divided, even though I've got a nice smile on my face. And I will be responsible for being a schism maker on the Day of Judgment. Therefore, this rule, in whatever easy form or fashion, is imperative, especially for us today to understand and grasp. In matters of legitimate differences, there is some flexibility. In matters of scholarly agreement, there is no flexibility. And if I don't know, then let me treat everything as, well, maybe there is a difference of opinion, so that I won't make schism. But there are obvious ones that we know. We know that prayer is 5 times a day. We know that the obligatory fasting is in Ramadan. We know that Hajj is to Makkah and not Timbuktu. We know that wine is prohibited. And by extension, we know that any substance of that nature which intoxicates, which includes drugs, is just as prohibitive, if not more. We know that stealing is haram. These things, maybe there's a difference of opinion whether I can nick somebody's money or not. No, there's no difference of opinion, and we should know that. I will leave you, just before I do a short second khutbah, with something that, if you can look and investigate before Ramadan, brilliant. If you can't, honestly, trust me, though it is important, inshallah ta'ala, there are enough reasons why we may have an excuse not to be able to research this before Ramadan, and maybe we can do it before Ramadan 2024 next year, which is this. For the last 50 years, and it's only been 50 years, you can look in the literature, in the Arabic literature, some scholars have insisted that Salatul Taraweeh, the Sunnah, is 8 rak'ahs. Forget about the reason why they say so. They think they have some justification from some hadith in Bukhari. There is a scholarly ijma, scholarly consensus. From the time of the second generation of Muslims, the Tabi'un. Tabi'un are students of the Sahaba. Tabi'un are students of the Sahaba. Okay? Like Imam Abu Hanifa, student of Sahaba. Or Tabi'un, the next generation, like Imam Malik. His scholars were students of Sahaba. He wasn't himself a student of Sahaba, but his scholars were, his teachers were. They're seeing, they're learning all of this knowledge from the earliest Muslims who learned from the Prophet. We don't find a single Imam saying 8 rak'ah is the Sunnah. In fact, we find no single Imam in any generation of Islam until 1960 or 1950 saying that 8 rak'ah is Taraweeh, is the Sunnah. All we find in the first early generations of Muslims is 2 main opinions. Taraweeh is 20 rak'ah, or if you lived in Medina at the time of Imam Malik and just after or just before, it was 36 rak'ah. But after the Imam Malik's time, they fell in line with the rest of the Muslim world, which was 20 rak'ah. Shaykh Muhammad Atiyah Salim, rahmatul alayh, one of the scholars of Medina, who died in 1970, was commissioned by the then Mufti of the kingdom to write a book about what is the practice of Makkah and Medina in terms of Taraweeh from the time of the Sahaba. And so he wrote this booklet, about 150, 180 pages. It's quite a laborious book, and he just goes through every 5-10 years from the time of the Sahaba and the early Salaf, what Makkah and Medina were doing. If Makkah and Medina were doing that, it's likely the rest of the world was doing it, okay? And there is not a single entry in there up until 1970 that they were praying 8 rak'ah. Because 8 rak'ah is not a number that ever came down to us from our Imams who knew best the correct understanding of the hadith, whether hadith Aisha in Bukhari or whatever other hadith people think they have. If we start down this dangerous slippery slope of saying we can do an act that none of our Imams and Salaf have ever done because we interpret the verse according to our understanding, then be sure someone will come along and say, well, though the verse about the Prophet Lot, it says, will you approach women rather than men? What an abomination. From there we get the prohibition of the kind of LGBT kind of thing. Well, why can't I just interpret it away against the consensus? The consensus is, it doesn't matter what type of relationship, what type of intention a man decides to be with a man, out of love, out of rape, out of disgust, out of genuine adoration. But the act itself, you get what I mean by the act itself, right? It's haram. Well, It doesn't matter if no one's had my opinion. I come along with the opinion and say, well, if it's done out of aggression, out of just pure desire, it's haram. But if it's done out of genuine love, like a husband loves the wife, like Romeo loves Juliet, like Layla loves Majnun, then it's okay, bro. And you say, well, but who understood it that way? No, this is my understanding. I'm Shaykh Abu Aliyah. I do khutbahs for you, bro. Then Islam is ripped right out of our view. Because then we can interpret 1,001 things. Why don't we eat pork? Simple. In the time of the Prophet, they didn't have purifying, homogenizing factories. But now, we don't have to worry about our pork having disease and tapeworms and whatever in hot countries. We just homogenize it and purify it and freeze it. So pork is allowed. Oh, that sounds like a good argument. That sheikh, he gives khutbahs. No. Did I make an interpretation that not goes against an interpretation of a few other scholars and agrees with a few other scholars? That's fine. But it goes against everybody, all the scholars? Not possible, not permissible. We have to have this rule. Otherwise, we will continue splitting and dividing over issues and things and accusing each other. Or the opposite extreme, allowing every opinion, whatever it is, wishy-washy, whatever, to come into Islam. In both ways, it won't be sirat al-mustaqim. We ask Allah Jalla Jalaluhu for tawfiq, and I beg your forgiveness for going well over time. I'll keep the second khutbah incredibly short. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. أيها الناس اتقوا الله فإن تقوى رأس كل شيء اتقوا الله وأطيعوه وراقبوه. قال تعالى في كتاب العزيز إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا وحبيبنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى. اللهم اشف مرضانا وارحم موتانا. اللهم اشف مرضانا وارحم موتانا. اللهم اشف مرضانا وارحم موتانا. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون فاذكروني أذكركم واشكروا لي ولا تكفرون وأقيموا الصلاة.